Firefighters in London faced their busiest day since World War II, taking 2,670 calls compared to around 500 on a busy day. Paul, I want to come to you on this to kind of draw on your experience as a firefighter and, you know, colleagues and friends of yours who still are kind of active. It must have been a really horrendous day.
It was brutal for firefighters in that situation. I mean, not just the heat, but obviously wearing full fire gear, in many cases working for hours and hours at an incident, these wildfires. 15 major incidents declared by local authority fire and rescue services up and down the country. And the truth is, the point needs to be made that actually firefighters are doing this stuff now with one hand tied behind their backs, because the level of cuts that have been imposed on the fire and rescue service over the last decade or more is scandalous. We've seen something like 1 in 5 frontline firefighter posts go since 2010, 12,000 frontline firefighter posts. We've seen scores of fire stations closed. We've seen hundreds of fire engines being taken out of action. And of course, that's had the impacts of longer response times. It means that firefighters are now taking longer to get to a fire, and that comes with an increased life risk to the public. And this really needs highlighting, because it hasn't been highlighted enough. And what really angers me is firefighters have just been offered 2% by the National Fire Service employers as their annual pay increase. When you look what firefighters have done, they carried on working throughout the pandemic. They're dealing with these incidents now more and more. And to say to them all you're worth this year is 2%, I think is absolutely inexcusable. So there's a perfect storm at the moment in the fire service, where there's a lot of anger and low morale as a result of the cuts that have taken place and the lack of decent pay awards. And all of that, I think, is going to come to a head quite shortly.
And there's speculation that these sort of extreme weather incidents may continue or even increase. Is that a concern for the fire service at the moment?
It's certainly a concern if you don't have sufficient resources to be able to deal with it. And firefighters are adaptable. I mean, firefighters will go to any emergency where they can render assistance. I know that from personal experience, and firefighters will always want to help. But what they get really angry about is if they believe they're not being given the tools to do the job. And increasingly over recent years, with the savage cuts that have been imposed, and we saw it really in the early part of this week where services were stretched to breaking point, that really needs to be addressed urgently.